weeks since I posted a video, and I've been so far behind with dealing with some stuff. Um, I originally was gonna post tomorrow, but then I realized it's my birthday tomorrow, so I'm probably not gonna have anything posted. Um, so we're just gonna do it today, and then I can have my whole day for my birthday to relax tomorrow. So today our video is on Ethiopia. Um, Ethiopia officially is the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, known as FDRE, and it's a landlocked country located in the Horn of Africa. Um, and it's a region of East Africa, and it shares its border with um, er, um, Eritrea to the north, Djibouti to the northeast, Somalia to the east, and Kenya to the south. And then you got South Sudan to the west and Sudan to the northwest. Now, Ethiopia covers a land area of about 426,400 square miles, and as of 2025, it has around 135 million inhabitants, making it the 14th most populous country in the world. Now, the national capital and largest city, um, Addis Ababa, lies several kilometers west of the East African rift that splits the country into the African and Somali tectonic plates. Um, Anatomically, modern humans emerged from modern-day Ethiopia in the year 980 BC. The kingdom of Demet extended its realm over Eritrea and the northern region of Ethiopia, while the kingdom of Axum maintained a unified civilization in the region for 900 plus years. Christianity arrived to the kingdom in about the year 330 AD, while Islam gained influence during the first Hijra in 615. I have to start making notes on some of the stuff, and this is going to be for more videos down the line. Um, After the collapse of Aksum in 960, the Zagwe dynasty ruled the north central parts of Ethiopia. The Shawan usurper Yukino Amlak overthrew the dynasty in the year 1270 at the Battle of Ansata, inaugurating the Ethiopian Empire and the Solomonic dynasty. Now, starting its lineage through Exumite legitimacy by the biblical Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and Menelik, Menelik the first was the first emperor by the 14th century. That empire had grown in prestige through territorial and fighting against adjacent territories, most notably the Ethiopian Aldel War, which went from 1529 to 1543, and it contributed to fragmentation of the empire, which ultimately fell under a decentralization known as Zemini Masafent in the mid 18th century. Emperor Theodorus II ended the Zemini Masafent at the beginning of his reign in 1855, making the marking the reunification and modernization of Ethiopia on that line. In the 19th century, or the later part of it, Ethiopia repelled foreign invasion from both Egypt and Italy, most notably defeating an Italian invasion at the Battle of Adwa in 1896. Under Emperor Menelik II, it also expanded its territory, remaining independent during the scramble for Africa and establishing its current borders. Now, Ethiopia lost its sovereignty in 1936 when Italy, under Benito Mussolini, invaded during the Second Italian-Ethiopian War, and following Ethiopia's defeat, Italian East Africa was established in 1941 during World War II was in 1944. The Derg, which is a Soviet-blocked military junta, took power in 1974 after deposing Emperor Haile Selassie and the Salamic dynasty, and ruled the country for nearly 17 years amidst the Ethiopian Civil War. Now, following the dissolution of the Derg in 1991, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front dominated the country with the new constitution and ethnic-based federalism. And since then, Ethiopia has suffered from prolonged and unsolved um, inter-ethnic clashes and political instability marked by authoritarianism. From 2018, regional and ethnically based factions carried out armed attacks and multiple ongoing wars throughout Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is a multi-ethnic state with over 80 different ethnic groups in that country. Christianity is the most widely professed faith in the country, with the largest being the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, followed by Islam and a small percentage of traditional faiths. The country is a founding member of the UN and hosts the headquarters of the African Union Commission and many other global non-governmental organizations focused on Africa, also becoming a full member of BRICS in 2024. Ethiopia is one of the least developed countries, but is sometimes considered an emerging power, having the fastest economic growth in sub-Saharan African power, basically, in the African countries because of foreign direct investment and expansion of agriculture. So you got agriculture, manufacturing industries. Agriculture is the country's largest economic sector, accounting for over 30% of the GDP as of 2022. Though the Ethiopian economy has experienced So the Ethiopian economy has experienced consistent growth in terms of per capita income and the Human Development Index. The country remains among the poorest in Africa, but Ethiopia faces numerous challenges, including high rates of poverty, human rights violations, widespread ethnic discrimination, and a literacy rate of only 60%. So tradition states that the name Ethiopia comes from the name of the first king of Ethiopia, Ethiopius. Now, Ayeli Bakuri explains, according to an Ethiopian tradition, the term Ethiopia is derived from the word Ethiopius, a name of an Ethiopian king, the seventh in the ancestral lines. Axum, or the Ethiopian Book of Axum, identifies Etopius as the 12th king of Ethiopia and the father of Aksunami. The Ethiopians pronounce Ethiopia with the Sades or the sixth sound A as an incorporated, and the graph has no equivalent in Latin graphs. Now, Ethiopius is believed to be the 12 direct descendants of Adam. His father is identified as Cush, while his grandfather is known as Cam. Not even close. The 15th century Gia's Book of Axum, the name is ascribed to a legendary individual called It Ityopis. He was an extra biblical son of Cush, son of Ham, and said to have found the city of Axum. The Greek name um, Ioria is a compound word later explained as derived from the Greek words I burn or op space. Now, according to the Liddell Scott Jones Greek English lexicon, the designation properly translates as burnt face in a noun form and red brown in an adjective in an adjective form. Now the historian Herodotus used the appellation to denote those parts of Africa south of the Sahara that were then known within the Euxine habitable world. The earliest mention of the term is found in the works of Homer, where it is used to refer to two peoples groups, one in Africa and the one in the east, from eastern Turkey to India. This Greek name was borrowed into Amharic. Now, in Greco-Roman epigraphs, um, Ethiopia was a specific toponym for ancient Nubia. At least as early as 850, the name Ethiopia also occurs in many translations of the Old Testament in allusion to Nubia. The ancient Hebrew texts identify Nubia instead as Cush. However, in the New Testament, the Greek term E- um, Ethiops does occur, referring to a servant of the Kandake and the Queen of Kush. Now, following the Hellenic and biblical translations, the monumentum now following the Hellenic and biblical traditions, the monumentum Oldotanium, a third century inscription belonging to the Aksumite Empire, indicates that Aksum's ruler government governed an area that was flanked to the west. Um, the Aksumite king Azania eventually conquered Nubia the following century, and the Aksumites thereafter appropriated the designation Ethiopians for their own kingdom, which I don't have a problem with them doing. But in the Gia's version of the Azania inscription, um, it's equated with the vocalized Habashat and denotes for the first time the highland inhabitants of Aksum. This new demonym was subsequently rendered as Abash in the Sabaic and as Habasha in Arabic. And derivations of this are used in some languages that are used as loan words from Arabic. For example, in Malay Habsia. In English and generally outside of Ethiopia, the country was historically known as a um, Abyssinia, which I've never heard of that one. Now, several have propelled Ethiopia and the surrounding region to the forefront of the oldest hominid discovered to date in Ethiopia is about 4.2 million years old. Now, the most well-known hominid discovery is a person named Lucy, known locally as Jinkanish. This specimen was found in the Awash Valley of our region in 1974 by a guy named Johansson, and he is one of the most complete and best preserved adult fossils ever uncovered. Now, Lucy's taxonomic name refers to the region where the discovery was made, but this hominid is estimated to have lived about 3.2 million years ago, but nobody knows who the person is. Um, Now, Ethiopia is also considered to be one of the earliest sites of the emergence of Homo sapiens. The oldest of these local fossil finds, the Amo remains, were excavated in the southwestern Amo Kabish area and have been dated to the Middle Paleolithic era, which was about 200,000 years ago. Now, additionally, skeletons of Homo sapiens adultu were found at a site in the Middle Awash Valley, which dated which dated back to approximately 160,000 years ago, but they may represent an extinct subspecies of Homo sapiens or the immediate ancestors of anatomically modern humans. Archaic Homo sapiens fossils excavated at the Jebel Urhoud site in Morocco have since been dated to an earlier period, about 300,000 years ago, while Omo Kobish from southern Ethiopia is the oldest anatomically modern Homo sapien skeleton, currently around 196 plus 5 KYA years ago. Now, according to some anthropologists, the first Afro-Asiatic speaking population arrived in the region during the ensuing Neolithic era from the family's proposed Hermayet original homeland in the Nile Valley, or the Near East. Now, the majority of scholars today propose that the Afro-Asiatic family developed in Northeast Asia or Africa because of the higher diversity of lineages in that region, a telltale sign of linguistic origin. In 2019, archaeologists discovered a 30,000 year old middle stone rock shelter at the Fincha Habera site in the Bayo Mountains at an elevation of 3,469 feet above sea level. At this high altitude, humans are susceptible to both hypoxia and extreme weather. According to a study published in the journal Science, this dwelling is proof of the earliest permanent human occupation at high altitude yet discovered. Thousands of animal bones, hundreds of stone tools, and ancient fireplaces were discovered, revealing a diet that featured giant mole rats. I cannot see myself eating any rats. Um, um, Evidence of some of the earliest known stone-tipped projectile weapons, a characteristic tool of Homo sapiens. The stone tips of javelins or throwing spears were discovered in 2013 um, at the Ethiopian site of Guatemala, which date to around 279,000 years ago. Now, in 2019, additional Middle Stone Age projectile weapons were found at Aduma, dated to around 100,000 years ago to 80,000 years ago, in the form of points considered likely to belong to darts delivered by spear throwers. Hold on one second, I gotta take a message. I'll be back. Uh, uh, so in 980 BC, Demet was established in a present-day Eritrea and the northern part of Ethiopia in the Tigray region, and is widely believed to be the successor state to Punt. Um, this polity's capital was located at Yawa, in what is now northern Ethiopia. Most modern historians consider this civilization to be a native Ethiopian one, although in earlier times many suggested it was a Sabaean influence because of the latter's hegemony of the Red Sea. Now other scholars regard Demet as the result of a union of Afro-Asiatic speaking cultures of the Cushitic and Semitic branches, namely local Agwa people and Sabaeans from southern Arabia. Now, however, Ge'ez, the ancient Semitic language of Ethiopia, is thought to have developed independently from the Sabaean language, but now they speak a different one. As early as 2000 BC, other Semitic speakers were living in Ethiopia and Eritrea, where the Ge'ez developed. Sabaean influence is now thought to have been minor, limited to a few localities and disappearing after a few decades or a century. It may have been a trading or military colony in alliance with the Ethiopian civilization of Demet or some other proto-Aksumite state. I'm not sure what the language is that's spoken in Ethiopia right now, but um I work with a lot of Ethiopians at my job. So they don't speak very good English, but they're learning, or at least they're trying to. Now, after the fall of the Demet during the 4th century BC, the Ethiopian plateau came to be dominated by smaller successor kingdoms. In the 1st century AD, the kingdom of Aksum emerged in what is now Tigray region in Eritrea, according to the medieval book of Aksum. The kingdom's first capital, Malzabur, was built by Idiopus, who was the son of Cush. Aksum would later at times extend its rule into Yemen on the other side of the Red Sea, and the Persian prophet Mani listed Aksum with Rome, Persia, and China as one of the four great powers of his era during the 3rd century. It is also believed that there was also a connection between Egyptian and Ethiopian churches, but there is faint evidence that the Aksumites were associated with the Queen of Sheba via the royal inscription. Around 316 AD, Frumentius and his brother Edius from Tyre accompanied their uncle on a voyage to Ethiopia. When the vessel stopped at a Red Sea port, the natives killed their travelers except the two brothers who were taken to the court to be slaves. They were given positions of trust by the monarch, and they converted members of the royal court to Christianity. Frumentius became the first bishop of Aksum. A coin dated to 324 shows that Ethiopia was the second country to officially adopt Christianity after Armenia did so in 301. Although the religion may have been at first confined to court circles, it was the first major power to do so. The Aksumites were accustomed to the Greco-Roman sphere of influence, but they embarked on a significant cultural tie and trade connection between the Indian subcontinent and the Roman Empire via the Silk Road. Primarily exporting ivory, tortoiseshell, gold, and emeralds, and importing silk and spices, the country's gold population in 2015 is 9 tons. Not sure if that's considered good or not. No, the kingdom adopted the name Ethiopia during the reign of Ezana in the 4th century. After the conquest of Kingdom of Kush in 330, the Aksumite territory reached its peak between the 5th and 6th centuries. This period was interrupted by several incursions into the South Arabian protectorate, including the Jewish Jew Nuwas of the Himmerite kingdom and the Aksumite Persian Wars. In 575, the Aksumites besieged and retook Sana's following the assassination of its governor Saif Yazan. The Red Sea was left to the Rashidun Caliphate in 646, and the port of Adulis was plundered by Arab Muslims in the 8th century. Yes, yes, people that are jealous are losers. In the 8th century, along with irrevocable land degradation, claimed the climate change and sporadic rainfall precipitation from 730 to 760. Now, these factors likely caused the kingdom to decline in power as part of an important trade route. Aksum came to an end in 960 when Queen Gudet defeated the last king of Aksum. In response, the remnant. So you have the irrevocable land degradation, claimed climate change, and sporadic rainfall precipitation from 730 to 760. These factors likely caused the kingdom to decline in power as part of their important trade route. Um, Now, Aksum, as I said, came to an end in 960 when Queen Gildet defeated the last king of Aksum. In response, the remnant of the Aksumite population shifted into the southern region and established the Zagwe dynasty. Changing its capital to Lalabela, Zagwe's route ended when an Amhara nobleman, Yakuno Amlak, revolted against King Yetmerek and established the Ethiopian Empire that was known as the Exodus Abyssinia. Now, the Ethiopian Empire initiated territorial expansion under the leadership of Amda Sayan I. He launched multiple campaigns against his Muslim adversaries to the east, and resulted in a significant shift in the balance of power in favor of the Christians for the next 2 centuries. After Amda Sayan's successful eastern campaign, most of the Muslim principalities in the Horn of Africa came under the certainty of the Ethiopian Empire, stretching from Gojam to the Somali coast and Zila. Among these Muslim entities was the Sultanate of Afat. During the reign of Emperor Zara Yaqub, the Ethiopian Empire reached its pinnacle. His role was marked by the consolidation of territorial acquisitions from earlier rulers and the oversight of the construction of numerous churches and monasteries, the active promotion of literature and arts, and the strengthening of central imperial authority. Now, Afat's successor, the Adel Sultanate, tried to conquer Ethiopia during the Ethiopian-Adal War, but was ultimately defeated at the 1543 Battle of Waina Daga. By the 16th century, an influx of migration by ethnic Oromo into northern parts of the region fragmented the empire's power. Embarking from present-day Guji and Barania zone, the Oromos were largely motivated by several folkloric conceptions, beginning with Magasa and Lakmissa, many of whom related to the raids. Um, Now this persisted until Gada of Mesli. Now, according to Abba Bauri, the earliest expansion occurred under the Emperor Dawit II when they encroached to Baal before invading the Abdul Sultanate. Now, Ethiopia saw major diplomatic contact with Portugal from the 17th century, mainly related to religion. Beginning in 1555, Portuguese Jesuits attempted to develop Roman Catholicism as the state religion. After several failures, they sent several missionaries in 1603, including the most influential Spanish Jesuit Pedro Payas under the Emperor Susanos I. Roman Catholicism became the state religion of the Ethiopian Empire in 1622, and this decision caused an uprising by the Orthodox populace. In the year 1632, Emperor Facilis halted Roman Catholic state administration and restoring the Orthodox Tewahedo as the state religion. Now, Philocides' reign solidified imperial power, relocating the capital to Gondar in 1636, marking the beginning of the Gondarine period. Now, he reclaimed lands and exiled Jesuits to Fremona. During his rule, Philocides constructed the iconic royal fortress of the Fasil Gabi, built and had built 44 churches and revived the Ethiopian art. He is also credited with building several stone bridges over the Blue Nile River. Gondar's power declined after the death of Iyasu in 1706. Following Iyasu II's death in 1755, Empress Mentawab brought her brother Raz to Gondar, making him was Bidawatted. This led to regional conflict between Mentawab's and the Wallo group led by Wubit. In 1767, Raz Mikhail Suhel, a regent in Tigray province, seized Gondar, killing the child Ios the First in 1769, the reigning emperor, and installed a 70-year-old Johannes II. Between 1769 and 1855, Ethiopia witnessed the Zamani Mesafint, or Age of Princes, a period of isolation. Emperors became figureheads controlled by regional lords and noblemen like Raz Mikhail Suhel of Tigray, and by the Aramo dynasty of the Warashe, including Raz Gugza of Uji. And before the before the Zamani okay, so currently in Ethiopia they speak something called Amharic, which is not a language I'm familiar with, or even a language I speak at all. Now we get to the age of imperialism. Now Ethiopian isolationism ended following a British mission that concluded with an alliance between the two nations, but it was not until 1855 that the Amhara kingdoms of northern Ethiopia, like Gondar, Gojam, and Shawa, were briefly united after the power of the emperor was restored, beginning with the reign of Tuodros II. Teodros II began a procession of consolidation, centralization, and state building that would be continued by succeeding emperors. Now, this process reduced the power of regional rulers, and it restricted the empire's administration and created a professional army. Now, these challenges created the basis for establishing the effective sovereignty and the territorial integrity of the Ethiopian state. In the years 1875 and 1876, Ottoman and Egyptian forces, accompanied by many European and American advisors, twice invaded Abyssinia that were initially defeated. From 1885 to 1889, under Johannes IV, Ethiopia joined the Mahdi's War, which allied to Britain. The Ottomans and Egypt invaded the Sudanese Mahdi state. In the year 1887, Menelik II, king of Shawa, invaded the emirate of Harar after his victory at the Battle of Shalanqo. On March 10th of 1889, Johannes IV was killed by the Sudanese Cal- Khalifa Abdullah's army while leading his army in the Battle of Galabat. And you do got some pictures here I want that are pretty interesting here. So we'll take a look at that. So you got some of these pictures here. That the top one is Emperor Theodros II, and the bottom one was Emperor Menelik II defending Ethiopian sovereignty during the age of imperialism. Then you go up here and you got some more pictures, like the one to the left is Falso Gabi, one of the key castles of the Gondarine period. To the right here is a copy of the 17th century philosophical and ethical treaty by Ethiopian philosopher Zarwa. Right here you got something called Biete Medina Alam, which was built during the Zagwe dynasty in the Middle Ages. Right here is the Empire of Aksum at its peak in the 6th century. And then this is the currency that is used in Ethiopia. And this is actually housed in a British museum, those two coins. And right here was the skull that I was talking about earlier, where they said the first skull was found in Ethiopia. But yeah, you get the idea of how interesting this stuff is. History has always been interesting to me. So Ethiopia, in roughly its current form, began under the reign of Menelik II, who was emperor from 1889 until his death in 1913. From his base in the central province of Shawa, Menelik set out to annex territories to the southeast and west. Areas inhabited by the Oromo, Sidama, Garaj, Waleta, and others. He achieved this with the help of Raz Gomana Dashi's Shawan Oromo militia, which occupied lands that had not been held since the Ahmad Ghazi's war, as well as other areas that had never been under Ethiopian rule before. Now, for his leadership, despite opposition from more traditional elements of society, Menelik II was heralded as a national hero. He had signed the Treaty of Wuchale with Italy in May of 1889, by which Italy would recognize Ethiopia's sovereignty so long as Italy could control an area north of Ethiopia, which is now part of modern Eritrea. Now, in return, Italy was to provide Menelik with weapons and support him as an emperor. The Italians used the time between the signing of the treaty and its ratification by the Italian government to expand their territorial claims. The first Italo-Ethiopian War culminated in the Battle of Adwa on March 1st of 1896, in which Italy's colonial forces were defeated by the Ethiopians. During this time, about a third of the population died in the Great Ethiopian Famine, which happened between 1888 to 1892, and the Rinderpest swept through the area, destroying much of the herd economy. On October 11th of 1897, Ethiopia adopted the colors of the Pan-African flag with green, yellow, and red stripes in representation of a Pan-Africanist ideology. The early 20th century was marked by the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie. He came to power after Lij Ayuso was deposed and undertook a nationwide modernization campaign from 1916, when he was made a Raz and regent for the Empress Ragnet Zudidu, and became the de facto ruler of the Ethiopian Empire following Zidudu's death on November 2nd of 1930. He succeeded her as an emperor in 1931. Selassie endowed Ethiopia with its first constitution in the emulation of the Imperial Japan's 1890 constitution. And here's a picture of Ethiopian troops up the top. They were sent by the government under the Emperor Selassie I during the Korean War, fighting for South Korean independence. And then down here, you got the Emperor Selassie with U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt during the end of World War II. The independence of Ethiopia was interrupted by the Second Italian-Ethiopian War, beginning when it was invaded by Italy in early October of 1935, and by the subsequent Italian rule of the country in 1936 to 1941 after Italian victory in the war. Italy, however, never managed to secure the control of the country in its totality due to resistance from the Armagnac. This made Ethiopia, along with Liberia, the only African country to never be fully colonized. Now, following the entry of Italy into World War II, British Empire forces, together with the Armagnac, liberated Ethiopia in the course of the East African Campaign in 1941. Now, this country was placed under British military administration and then Ethiopia's full sovereignty, and it was restored with the signing of the Anglo-Ethiopian Agreement in December of 1944. On October 24th of 1945, Ethiopia became a founding member of the United Nations. In 1952, Selassie orchestrated a federation with Eritrea. He dissolved this in 1962 and annexed Eritrea, resulting in the Eritrean War of Independence. Selassie also played a leading role in the formation of the Organization of African Unity, also known as OAU. Now, opinion within Ethiopia turned against Selassie owing to the worldwide 1973 oil crisis, causing a sharp increase in gasoline prices starting on February 13th, 1974, leading to student and worker protests. The feudal oligarch um, cabinet of Hakalu Wold was toppled, and a new government was formed with Makonnen serving as prime minister. Now, Selesty's role ended on September 12th of 1974 when he was deposed by the Derg, a committee made up of military and police officers. After the execution of 60 former government and military officials, the new Provisional Military Administrative Council abolished the monarchy in March of 1975, and they established Ethiopia as a Marxist-Leninist state. The abolition of feudalism, increased literacy, nationalization, and sweeping land reform, including the resentment and vigilization from the Ethiopian highlands, became priorities. Now, after a power struggle in 1977, Mengistu Haile Miriam gained undisputed leadership of the Derg in 1977. Somalia, which had previously been receiving assistance and arms from Russia, invaded Ethiopia in the Agaden War, capturing part of the Agaden region. Ethiopia recovered it after it began receiving massive military aid from the Soviet bloc countries. By the end of the 70s, Mengistu presided over the second largest army in all of sub-Saharan Africa, as well as a formidable air force and navy. And here's a picture of him, Mengistu Haile Miriam, and he was sentenced to death in absentia for committing crimes during his rule. I'm not sure what crimes those were, but I guess we'll find out. In between the years of 1976 and 78, up to 500,000 were killed as a result of the Red Terror, which was a violent political repression campaign by the Derg against various opposition rules. In 1987, the Derg dissolved itself and established the People's Democratic Republic of Ethiopia upon the adoption of the 1987 Constitution of Ethiopia. A 1983 and 1985 famine affected around 8 million people, resulting in 1 million people dying. The insurrectionists against authoritarian rule sprang up, particularly in the northern regions of Eritrea and Tigray. The Tigray People's Liberation Front had merged with other ethnically based opposition movements in 1989 to form the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front. The collapse of Marxism and Leninism during the revolutions of 1989 coincided with the Soviet Union stopping aid to Ethiopia altogether in 1990. Now the APRDF forces advanced on Addis Ababa in May of 1991, and Mengistu fled the country, and he was granted asylum to live in Zimbabwe. In July of 1991, the EPRDF convened a national conference to establish the transitional government of Ethiopia, and it was composed of an 87-member council of representatives, and it was guided by a national charter that functioned as a transitional constitution. In 1994, a new constitution was written that established a parliamentary republic with a bicameral legislature and a judicial system. In April of 1993, Eritrea gained independence from Ethiopia after a national referendum. In May of 1998, a border dispute with Eritrea led to the Eritrean-Ethiopian War, which lasted about 2000, and it cost both countries over an estimated $1 million a day, basically. Damn, a fucking day for 7 years. God, you got to take 1 million times 7 years and see what the fuck that would add up to. And this had a negative effect on Ethiopia's economy, and a border conflict between the two countries would continue until 2018. As of the year 2018, further civil war in Ethiopia countries mainly as of 2018, further civil war in Ethiopia continues mainly due to destabilization of the country. Ethnic violence rose in the late 2010s and early clashes and conflicts, leading to millions of Ethiopians being displaced and moving out of the country. Now, the federal government decided that elections for 2020, later being rescheduled to 2021, be canceled due to health and safety concerns about COVID-19 at that time. The Tigray region's TPLF opposed this and proceeded to hold elections anyway on September 9th of 2020. Relations between the federal government and Tigray deteriorated rapidly, and in November of 2020, Ethiopia began a military offensive in Tigray in response to attacks on army units stationed there, marking the beginning of the Tigray War. By March of 2022, as many as 500,000 people had died as a result of violence and famine. After a number of peace and mediation proposals in the intervening years, Ethiopian and Tigrayan rebel forces agreed to a ceasefire of hostilities on November 2nd of 2022. Coupled with the Ola insurgency, the federal government relations with Fano militaries, who previously allied to the government in the Tigray War, deteriorated in mid 2023. And this resulted in a war with the Mara region. According to reports conducted by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, mass human rights violations carried out by ENDF troops included door-to-door searches, extrajudicial killings, massacres, and detentions. Notable incidents include the Marawi massacre in early 2024, which left 50 to 100 residents dead, in Amhara. At 372.61 square miles, Ethiopia is the world's 26th largest country, comparable in size to Bolivia. It lies between the third parallel north and the 15th parallel north, and longitude 33 meridian east and 48th meridian east. The major portion of Ethiopia lies in a thing called the Horn of Africa, which is the easternmost part of the African landmass. The territories that have frontiers with Ethiopia are Eritrea to the north, and then moving in a clockwise direction, Djibouti, Somalia, Kenya, South Sudan, and Sudan. Within Ethiopia is a vast highland complex of mountains and dissected plateaus divided by the Great Rift Valley, which runs generally southwest to northeast and surrounded by lowlands, steppes, or semi-desert. There is a great diversity of terrain with wide variations in climate, soils, natural vegetation, and settlement patterns. Ethiopia is an ecologically diverse country, ranging from the deserts along the eastern border to the tropical forests in the south, to the extent of Appleton in the northeast, in the northern and southwestern parts. Lake Tana in the north is the source of the Blue Nile. It also has many endemic species, notably the Galata, the the wily ibex and the Ethiopian wolf. Now let's take a look at these animals, and these are popular animals in Ethiopia. Okay, so here it's a type of monkey. This is called the galetta, which is a bleeding heart monkey because it's got a heart. It's got like a heart on the outside of his body, and it's called the bleeding monkey. Um, this is like a deer. So that one looks like a deer with horns, and then you got the Ethiopian wolf, no, also known as the simian fox, right there. Okay, right there, that's better. You can see it a little bit. So the wide range of altitude has given the country a variety of ecologically distinct areas, and this has helped to encourage the evolution of endemic species in an ecological isolation. Now, the nation is also a land of geographical contrast, ranging from the vast, fertile west with its forests and numerous rivers to the world's hottest settlement of Dawal in its north. The Ethiopian highlands are the largest continuous mountain ranges in Africa, and the Sof Omar Caves contains the largest cave on the continent. Ethiopia also has the second largest number of UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Africa. The predominant climate type is tropical monsoon with wide topographic induced variation. The Ethiopian highlands cover most of the country and have a climate which is generally considerably cooler than the other regions of similar proximity to the equator. Most of the country's major sites are located at elevations of around 2,000 to 2,500 um, miles, which is 6,562 feet above, which is anywhere between 6,562 to 8,202 feet above sea level, including historic capitals such as Gondar and Aksum. Now, the modern capital, Ababa, is situated on the foothills of Mount Entoto at an elevation of around 7,900 square feet and experiences a mild climate year round, but temperature is fairly uniform year round. The seasons in Addis Ababa are largely defined by rainfall. Um, a dry season from October to February, a light rainy season from March to May, and a heavy rain season from June to September. The average annual rainfall is approximately about 47 inches every year, which is a lot. So when it comes to Ethiopia, there are on average 7 hours of sunshine per day. The dry season is the sunniest time of the year, though even at the height of the rainy season in July and August, there are still usually several hours per day of bright sunshine. The average annual temperature in Addis Ababa is 61 degrees year round, with daily maximum temperatures averaging around 68 to 77,000 to 70, 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year, and overnight lows at around 41 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Uh, most major cities and tourist sites in Ethiopia lie at a similar elevation to Addis Ababa, and they have a comparable climate. In less elevated regions, particularly the low-lying Ethiopian grasslands and shrublands in the eastern part of Ethiopia, the climate can be significantly hotter and drier. Domol in the Danakil depression in this eastern zone has the world's highest average annual temperature of about 93 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. Ethiopia is vulnerable to many of the effects of climate change, and these include increases in temperature and changes in precipitation. Climate change in Ethiopia threatens food security and the economy, which is agriculture based. Many Ethiopians have been forced to leave their homes and travel as far as the Gulf, South Africa, and Europe to be able to plant crops. Um, Now here's another picture of the Blue Nile Falls. That is a waterfall. The Blue Nile Falls falls during winter provides over 86% of the Nile River's water coming from melted snow in the Simien Mountains. Since April of 2019, the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has promoted the Beautifying Sugar, a developmental project that aims to reduce the negative effects of climate change, among other things, in the capital city, Addis Ababa. In the following May, the government held Dine for Shager, a fundraising event in order to cover some of the $1 billion that would be needed through the public. Um, about $25 million was raised in the U.S. Through the expensive event, both through the cost of attending and donations. Two Chinese railway companies under the Belt and Road Initiative between China and Ethiopia had supplied funds to develop 12 of the total 56 kilometers. Now we get to biodiversity. Um, Ethiopia is a global center of avian diversity, and more than 856 bird species have been recorded in Ethiopia, and 20 of which are endemic to the country. 16 species are endangered or critically endangered. Many of these birds feed on butterflies, like Bicyclus anya. That's a type of butterfly here, and we can see that here. And this is the butterfly that we're talking about that the birds feed on out there. Now, historically, throughout the African continent, wildlife populations have been rapidly declining due to logging, civil wars, pollution, poaching, and other human factors. A 17-year-long civil war, along with severe droughts, negatively affected Ethiopia's environmental conditions, leading to even greater habitat degradation. Um, Habitat destruction is a factor that leads to endangerment, and when changes to a habitat occur rapidly, animals do not have time to adjust or find a new place to go hide. Human impact threatens many species, with greater threats expected as a result of climate change induced by greenhouse gases. With carbon dioxide emissions in 2010 of 6,494 tons, Ethiopia contributes about less than a percent to the annual human caused release of greenhouse gases. Um, Now, Ethiopia has 31 endemic species of mammals. Ethiopia has many species listed as critically endangered and vulnerable to global extinction. The threatened species in Ethiopia can be broken down into three categories based on the IUCN ratings: critically endangered, and vulnerable species. Ethiopia is one of the eight fundamental and independent centers of origin for cultivated plants in the world. However, deforestation is a major concern for Ethiopia, as studies suggest loss of forest contributes to soil erosion. The loss of nutrients in the soil, loss of animal habitats, and reduction in biodiversity. At the beginning of the 20th century, around 420 kilometers, or 35% of Ethiopia's land, was covered by trees, but recent research indicates that forest cover is now approximately only 11% of the area now. Um, Less than 12%, basically. The country has had a 2018 forest landscape um, integrity index mean score of 7.16 or 10, ranking it 50th globally out of 172 different countries. Now, Ethiopia loses an estimated 1,410 kilometers of natural forests each year due to firewood collection, conversion to farmland, overgrazing, and use of forest wood for building material. Between 1990 and 2005, the country lost approximately 21,000 kilometers of forest. Now, current government programs to control deforestation consist of education and promoting reforestation programs and providing raw materials, which are alternatives to timber. In rural areas, the government also provides non-timber fuel sources and access to non-forested land to promote agriculture without destroying forest habitat. Organizations such as SOS and Farm Africa are working with the federal government and local governments to create a system of forest management. Now, Ethiopia is recognized as a federal parliamentary republic wherein the prime minister is the head of the government and the president is the head of the state, but with largely ceremonial powers. Now, um, executive power is exercised by the government, and federal legislative power is vested in both the government and the two chambers of parliament. The House of Federation is the upper chamber of the bicameral legislature with 108 seats, and the lower chamber is the House of People's Representation with 547 seats. The House of Federation is chosen by the regional councils, whereas MPs of the HOPR are elected directly. In turn, they elect the president for a 6-year term and the prime minister for a 5-year term. Yeah, some of these countries have different rules on how they elect their presidents. So in a foreign country, the president can serve life can serve a life sen- can serve a life term as president. Basically being living in their home for longer extended periods of time. At the top here is the House People's Representative. Shit, fucker. Um, Somehow I accidentally exited out of that. And I was not meaning to. Okay, let me go back. So right here we got the top right here is the House of People's Representatives, and it's the lower house of the Ethiopian Federal Parliamentary Assembly. And then underneath is the Federal Supreme Court, is the highest court determining constitutionality or deals in the nation. Now, the Ethiopian judiciary consists of a dual system with two court structures, the federal and state courts. The FDRE Constitution vested federal judicial authority to the Federal Supreme Court, which can overturn and review decisions of subordinate federal courts. Itself has regular division assigned for fundamental errors of law. In addition, the Supreme Court can perform circuit hearings in established 5 states and any states of federal levels or area designated for its jurisdiction and deemed necessary for the efficient rendering of justice. Now, the federal Supreme Proclamation granted 3 subject matter principles, laws, parties, and place to federal court jurisdiction. And at first, cases arising under the Constitution, federal laws, and international treaties. Second, over parties specified by federal laws. On the basis of Article 78 of the 1994 Ethiopian Constitution, the judiciary is completely independent of the executive and the legislature. To ensure this, the president and vice president of the Supreme Court are appointed by Parliament on the nomination of the Prime Minister. And once elected, the executive power has no authority to remove them from office. Other judges are nominated by the Federal Judicial Administration Council, FJAC, on the basis of transparent criteria and the Prime Minister's recommendation for appointment in the HOPR. In all cases, judges cannot be removed from their duty unless they are retired, violated disciplinary rules, gross incompatibility, or an inefficiency to an unfit due to ill health. On the contrary, the majority votes of HOPR have the right to sanction removal and the federal judiciary level or state council in cases of state judges. In 2015, the realities of its provision were questioned in the report that were prepared by Freedom House. In post 1995, Ethiopia's politics have been liberalized, which promotes all-encompassing reforms to the country. Today, its economy is based on mixed market-oriented principles. Ethiopia has 12 semi-autonomous administrative regions that have the power to raise and spend their own revenue. Now, the first multi-party election took place in May of 1995, which was won by the APRDF. The president of the transitional government, APRDF leader, Meles Zenawi, became the first prime minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and Nagaso Gadada was elected as president. Males's government was constantly re-elected. However, these results were heavily criticized by international observers and denounced by the opposition as fraud, as a fraudulent election. Um, Meles, Meles would die on August 20th of 2012 in Brussels, where he was being treated for an unspecified illness that nobody knew he had. The deputy prime minister Hela Miriam Desalegn was appointed as the new prime minister until the 2015 election, and they remained so afterwards with his party in control of every parliamentary seat. Um, on February 15th of 2018, Hela Miriam stepped down following years of protests and state of emergency. Abiy Ahmed became the prime minister following Hela Miriam's resignation. He made a historic visit to Eritrea in 2018, ending the states of conflict between the two countries, and he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2019. Um, and here's a picture of him. So the guy on the bottom is Abiy Ahmed. He's the prime minister of Ethiopia. Um, and Tay Selassie is the president. Let's see how long these fuckers have been around. Um, Okay, so Abiy Ahmed has been the Ethiopian prime minister since 2018, which has been 8 years now. And Tay Selassie has been president of Ethiopia since 2024, so he has not been president that long. According to the democracy index published by the United Kingdom based on the Economist intelligence unit in late 2010, Ethiopia was an authoritarian regime, ranking as the 118th most democratic out of 167 countries. Ethiopia had dropped 13 places on the list and since 2008, and the 2010 report attributed the drop to the government's crackdown on opposition activities, media, and civil society before the 2010 parliamentary election, which the report argued it had made Ethiopia a de facto one-party state. Accompanied by pervasive internal and intercommunal conflicts in the 21st century, the Ethiopian government resorted to authoritarian structure, severing democratic and human rights. Freedom House, who has worked on Ethiopia since 2008, indicates that Ethiopia is not a free state due to very poor fundamental rights, political and civil liberties recorded in both the EPRDF and the Prosperity Party regime. Under Abiy Ahmed, Ethiopia is experiencing a democratic backsliding since 2019, marked by a turbulent period of internal conflict, jailing opposition group members, and limiting the media freedom. Now, Ethiopia has four levels of administratively divided regions, zones, districts, and wards. The country comprises 12 regions and two city administrations under these regions, and the two federal level city administrations are Addis Ababa and Dire Dawa. Now, Ethiopia, for a while, was historically a trading nation that exported goods such as gold, ivory, exotic animals, and incense. Modern Ethiopian foreign relations began under Emperor Tewodros II, who was during his reign. He sought to establish a cohesive Ethiopian state, but was thwarted by the British expedition of 1868. And since then, the country was seen as a redundant by world powers until the opening of the Suez Canal, due to an influence of the Mahdi's War. Now, today, Ethiopia maintains strong relations with China, Israel, Mexico, Turkey, and India, as well as neighboring countries. Ethiopia is a strategic partner of the Global War on Terrorism and African Growth of Opportunity and the Opportunity Act, known as the AGOA. Now, former U.S. President Barack Obama was the first incumbent U.S. president to visit Ethiopia back in July of 2015, and the speech he gave to the African Union during this trip focused on combating Islamic terrorism. Immigration from Ethiopia is primarily directed towards Europe, including Italy, the United Kingdom, and Sweden, as well as Canada and Australia, while immigration to the Middle East is primarily to Saudi Arabia and Israel. Now, Ethiopia is a founding member of the Non-Aligned Movement and the G24 and the G77. In 1963, the Organization of African Unity, which later renamed itself the African Union, was founded in Addis Ababa, which today hosts the Secretariat of the African Union. So you got the Ethiopian Prime Minister here, Meles Zenawi, bottom row. At that time, that was back in 2007. He's no longer Prime Minister. Then down at the bottom is the African Union headquarters located in Addis Ababa. Ethiopia is a founding member of the AU. So today, the Organization of African Unity, which later renamed itself the African Union, was founded in Addis Ababa, which today hosts the Secretary of the African Union, the African Union Commission. In addition, Ethiopia is also a member of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, also known as UNICA, and the African Standby Force, and many of global NGOs focused on Africa in itself. Now, Ethiopia's foreign relations with both Sudan and Egypt are somewhat fraught owing to the effects of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam project, which was escalated in 2020. And it would have on water rights to the region. And despite six upstream countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Tanzania, signing the Nile Basin Initiative in 2010, Egypt and Sudan rejected a water sharing treaty, citing the reduction of amounts of water to the Nile Basin and the challenge it would pose to their historic connection of water rights. And in 2020, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed warned that no force can stop Ethiopia from building a dam. If there is need to go to war, we could get millions readied. Now, Ethiopia is also one of the African countries that was a founding member of the League of Nations, which served as the predecessor for the UN since 1923. The United Nations Task Force in Ethiopia deal primarily with humanitarian issues and development, and some of the agencies maintain regional ties with UNICA and the AU. And the UN prioritizes the sustainable development in Ethiopia, including fighting poverty, sustainable economic growth, climate change, policy, and educational and healthcare provisions, increasing employment and the environmental protection. Now, the Ethiopians' army origins and military traditions date back to the earliest history of Ethiopia, and due to Ethiopia's location between the Middle East and Africa, it has long been in the middle of Eastern and Western politics and has been subject to foreign invasions. In 1579, the Ottoman Empire's attempt to expand from a coastal base of Massawa during the Ottoman conquest of Habesh was defeated. The army of the Ethiopian Empire was able to defeat the Egyptians in 1876 at Gura, led by Ethiopian Emperor Johannes IV. Ethiopia only has three branches inside the military, consisting of the Army, Air Force, and Navy, although it is landlocked. And with the annual budget of over $1 billion, it is the largest armed force in East Africa and one of the largest in Africa itself. Now, Ethiopia has two main federal law enforcement agencies at the federal level: the Ethiopian Federal Police, the EFP, and the National Intelligence and Security Services, and the NIS, serving both as a spy and as a spy agency and domestic law enforcement agency, has a national jurisdiction for counterterrorism and a foreign-related counter-espionage activities and protecting national security. It also has authority over international economic crimes relating to Ethiopia as a whole. It and the EFP both enforce federal tasks domestically, and they cooperate internationally to ensure and enforce border regulations and peoples and products coming in and out of Ethiopia. The EFP mostly polices non-international and non-espionage crimes, including civil rights matters and domestic financial crimes at the regional level. Ethiopia has 12 regional statewide police departments and two federally chartered police forces, and those being the Addis Ababa Police and the Dire Dawa Police Forces. Um, Now, Ethiopia registered the fastest economic growth under Meles Zenawi's administration. According to the IMF, Ethiopia has one of the fastest growing economies in the world, registering over 10% of economic growth from 2004 to 2009. It was the fastest growing non-oil dependent African economy in the years 2007 and 2008, but in 2015, the World Bank highlighted that Ethiopia had witnessed a rapid economic growth with real domestic with gross domestic product averaging about 11% between 2004 and 2014. In 2008 and 2011, Ethiopia's growth performance and considerable development gains were challenged by the high inflation and a difficult balance of payments situation. The inflation surged, loose military policy, large civil service wage increase in early 2011, and high food prices that they couldn't afford to buy. Um, in spite of fast growth in recent years, Ethiopia's GDP per capita is one of the lowest. But the economy faces a number of serious structural problems based on the most recent data from 2019. 69% of the population is affected by multi-dimensional poverty, and an additional 18% are vulnerable to it. With a focused investment in public and infrastructure and industrial parks, Ethiopia is attempting to address its structural problems by becoming a hub for light manufacturing in Africa. In 2019, a law was passed along allowing expatriate Ethiopians to invest in Ethiopia's financial service industry. Now the Ethiopian constitution specifies that rights to own land belong to only the state and the people, but citizens may lease land up for up to 100 years, but are unable to mortgage or sell it because they don't make enough to do so. Renting out land for a maximum of 20 years is allowed, and this is expected to ensure that land goes to the most. Land distribution and administration is considered an area where corruption is institutionalized, and facilitation payments are as well as bribes were often demanded when dealing with land related issues, as there is as there is no land ownership. Infrastructural projects are most often simply done without asking the land users, which then end up being displaced and without a home or a land. A lot of anger and distrust sometimes results in public protests. In addition, agricultural productivity remains low, and frequent droughts still beset the country, also leading to internal displacement. Um, Here's an Ethiopian logistics shipping cargo docked at a cargo ship docked at the Red Sea. Um, and down here is the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, constructed between 2011 and 2023, and it's the largest dam in all of Africa. Let's go to that right there at the bottom. Yep. Now Ethiopia has 14 major rivers flowing from its highlands, including the Nile. The Nile is also mentioned in the Bible. So it has the largest water reserve in Africa. As of 2012, hydroelectric plants represented around 88% of the total installed electricity generating capacity. The remaining electrical power was generated from fossil fuels, which is about 8.3%, and renewable sources at around 3%. Now, the electrification rate for the total population in 2016 was 42%, with 85% coverage in urban areas, and about 26% in coverage in rural areas. Now, as of 2016, the total electricity production was 11.15, and consumption was about 9.062, and there were about 0.166 TWh of electricity exported. Um, and about 2.784 GW of installed generating capacity. Now, Ethiopia delivers roughly around 81% of water volume to the Nile through the river basins of the Blue Nile, the Sabat River, and the Adabera. In 1959, Egypt and Sudan signed a bilateral treaty, the 1959 Nile Waters Agreement, which gave both countries exclusive maritime rights over the Nile waters. Ever since, Egypt has discouraged almost all projects in Ethiopia that sought to use local Nile tributaries. This had the effect of discouraging external financing of hydropower and irrigation projects in Western Ethiopia, thereby impeding water resource-based economic development projects. However, Ethiopia is in the process of constructing a large 6,450 MW hydroelectric dam on the Blue Nile River. It was completed in 2023. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is slated to be the largest hydroelectric power station in Africa. Um, Now the Guide third hydroelectric project is so far the largest in the country, with an installed capacity of 1,870 MW. Now, agriculture constitutes around 85% of the labor force. However, the service sector represents the largest portion of the GDP. Now, many other economic activities depend on agriculture, including marketing, processing, and exports of agricultural products. Um, Production is overwhelmingly by small-scale farmers and enterprises, and a large part of oilseeds, cereals, potatoes, sugarcane, and vegetables. Ethiopia is also a valuable center of diversity for domesticated crops, including enset, coffee, okra, and teff. I'm not sure what enset is, but let's go see what the fuck that is. But I do love my coffee. Okay, it's like a large banana. Okay, but I don't eat bananas anyway. So exports are almost entirely agricultural commodities, with the exception of gold exports, and coffee is the largest foreign exchange earner. Ethiopia is Africa's second biggest maize producer, according to UN estimations. The per capita GDP of Ethiopia has reached about $357 dollars as of 2011. Now, Ethiopia is often considered as the birthplace of coffee since cultivation began in the ninth century. Um, Exports from Ethiopia since in the 2009-2010 financial year totaled around $1.4 billion. Ethiopia produces more coffee than any other nation on the continent, and coffee provides a livelihood for close to 15 million Ethiopians, 16% of the population. Farmers in the eastern part of the country, where a warming climate is already impacting production, have struggled in recent years, and many are currently reporting largely failed harvests as a result of prolonged drought. And for me, I am a big coffee drinker. I love my coffee. I can't start my day without it. Um, Now, Ethiopia also has the fifth largest inventory of cattle. Other main export commodities are cotton, gold, leather products, and oilseeds. Recent development of the floriculture sector means Ethiopia is poised to become one of the top flower and plant exporters in the world. Um, so there is a lot of ways to get around, like for transportation. So right up here at the top, you got the Addis Ababa light rail, which is a train, and it carries over 50,000 passengers a day. And then down at the bottom, you got the Ethiopia's biggest company, Ethiopian Airlines, which has a revenue of about $6.1 billion and making it the 14th biggest airlines in revenue, and it contributes to the country's export business. I also work for the airport, and we get a lot of flights coming in and out of Ethiopia too. Um, now cross border trade by pastoralists is often informal and beyond state control and regulation. In East Africa, over 95% of cross border trade is through unofficial channels. The unofficial trade of live cattle, camels, sheep, and goats from Ethiopia sold to Somalia and Djibouti and Kenya generates an estimated total revenue of about 250 to 300 million annually, 100 times more than the official figure that anybody can get. Um, this trade helps lower food prices, increase food security, relieve border tensions, and promote regional integration. However, the unregulated and undocumented nature of this trade runs risks such as allowing disease to spread more easily across national borders. Furthermore, the government of Ethiopia is purportedly unhappy with lost tax revenue and foreign exchange revenues. Recent initiatives have sought to document and regulate this trade. With the private sector growing slowly, designer fashion and leather products like bags are becoming a big export business, with Tatu becoming the first luxury designer label in the country. Uh, Now, additional small-scale export precludes products include cereals, pulses, cotton, sugarcane, potatoes, and hides. With the construction of various new dams and growing hydroelectric electric power projects around the country, Ethiopia also plans to export electric power to its neighbors eventually down the line. Most regard Ethiopia's large water resources and potential resources as black gold. Uh, two trans-African African automobile routes pass through Ethiopia: the Cairo Cape Town Highway and the Djibouti Highway. Ethiopia has the 926 kilometers of electrified um, standard gauge railways, 656 kilometers for the Addis Ababa Djibouti Railway between Addis Ababa and the port of Djibouti via Awash, and 270 kilometers for the Awash Hera Gabayway Railway between Addis Ababa and the twin cities of Dessie and Kombolcha. Ethiopia has 58 airports as of 2012, and okay, Ethiopia had 58 airports as of 2012, but then it went up to 61 in 2016. Among these, the Bole International Airport in Addis Ababa and the Abba Tana um, Yema International Airport in Dire Dawa accommodate international flights going in and out. Um, Now, science and technology in Ethiopia are progressively emerging due to the lack of organized institutions. Manufacturing and service providers often place themselves in competitive programming in order to advance initiative and technological solutions through in-house arenas. The Ethiopian Space Science and Technology Institute is responsible for conducting multifaceted tasks regarding space and technology. Now, in addition, Ethiopia also launched a 70 um, kg multispectral remote sensing satellite in December of 2019. The president at the time, Salih Zadu, said that the satellite will provide all the necessary data and changes in climate and weather-related phenomena that would be used for the country's key targets in agriculture, forestry, as well as natural resources projection initiatives. Satellite manufacturing, assembling, integrating, and testing had begun by January 2020. This would also incremented facility built by French company, and it was funded by the European Investment Bank. Now, Ethiopia is the most populous landlocked country in the world. Its total population has grown substantially in recent decades. In 1980, there was 38 million people living there, and now it's up to 135 million. The 2015 Ethiopia population forecast is expected to be around 225 million by 2050. Um, According to the UN, estimations in 2013, the life expectancy had improved substantially. I just dropped my pen. Where the fuck did it go? Oh, right here. Okay, I'm tweaking. Okay, so the life expectancy was 56 years old, for men, and 60 for women. Ethiopia's population is highly diverse, containing over 80 different ethnic groups, the four largest of which are the Oromo, the Amhara, the Somali, and the Tigrayans. According to the Ethiopian National Census of 2007, the Oromo are the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia at about 34% of the nation's population. The Amhara represent about 27% of the country's inhabitants. Somalians and Tigrayans represent about 6% and about 6% of the population, respectively. Afro-Asiatic speaking communities make up the majority of the population among these Semitic speakers are often collectively referred to themselves as the Habesha people. The Arabic form of this term, al-Habasha, is the etymological basis of Abyssinia, the former name of Ethiopia in English and other European languages. Um, in 2009, Ethiopia hosted a population of refugees and asylum seekers numbering approximately 135,200. The majority of this population came um, the majority of this population came from Somalia, approximately 64,300 people, Eritrea, 41,700 people, and Sudan, 25,900 people. The Ethiopian government required nearly all refugees to live in refugee camps. Um, Now, when it comes to urbanization, population growth, migration, and urbanization are all straining both government and ecosystems' capacity to provide people with basic services. Urbanization has steadily been increasing in Ethiopia with two periods of significantly rapid growth. First in 1936 to 1941 during the Italian occupation under Mussolini's fascist government, and then from 1967 to 1975 when the populations of urban areas tripled. Um, Shagar Park is the largest park in the country, hosting hundreds of thousands of visitors a year since it opened up. Um, in 1936, Italy annexed Ethiopia, building infrastructure to connect major cities and a dam providing power and water. This, along with the influx of Italians and laborers, was the major cause of rapid growth during this period. The second period of growth was from 1967 to 1975, when rural populations migrated to towns seeking work and better living conditions. Um, Now, this pattern slowed down due to the 1975 land reform program instituted by the government, and which provided incentives for people to stay in rural areas. As people were moved from rural areas to the cities, there were fewer people to grow food in the population. So basically, food would end up just decaying and basically just go to waste. The Land Reform Act was meant to increase agricultural since food production was not keeping up with population growth or the period of 1970 to 83. This program encouraged the formation of peasant associations, large villages based on agriculture. The legislation did lead to an increase in food around reproduction. Um, Although there is debate over the cause, it may be related to the weather conditions more than the reform, but urban populations have continued to grow with an increase of 8.1% from 1975 to 2000. As of 20, sorry, as of 2024, Ethiopia is one of the most rapidly urbanizing countries in the world, although its population is still largely rural. Um, Migration to urban areas is usually motivated by the hope of better lives, and peasant associations' daily life is a struggle to survive. About 16% of the population in Ethiopia lives on less than $1 per day, and that ain't shit. Only 65% of rural households in Ethiopia had consumed the World Health Organization's minimum standard of food per day, 2,200 calories, with 42% of children under 5 years old being underweight. Basically means they were going to die from starvation anyway. Um, so over 6 million people live in Addis Ababa, which is the financial epicenter of the country. Um, um, Most poor families, about 75%, share their sleeping headquarters with livestock, and about 40% of children sleep on the floor, where nighttime temperatures average about 5 degrees in a cold season. The average family size is 6 or 7, living in a 30 square meter mud house and with less than less than 2 hectares of land to cultivate. That ain't shit either. Um, the peasant associations face a cycle of poverty since the land holdings are so small. Farmers cannot allow the land to lie fallow, which reduces soil fertility. This land degradation reduces the production of fodder for livestock, which causes low milk yields. And since the community burns livestock manure as fuel rather than plowing the nutrients back into the land, the crop production is reduced. The low productivity of agriculture leads to inadequate incomes for farmers, hunger, malnutrition, and disease. And these unhealthy farmers have difficulty working the land, and the productivity just drops further. Although conditions are drastically better in cities, all of Ethiopia suffers from poverty and poor sanitation. However, poverty in Ethiopia fell from 44% to 29.6% during the 2000 to 2011. According to the World Bank, in the capital city of Addis Ababa, 55% of the population used to live in slums. However, a construction boom in both the private and the public sector has led to a dramatic improvement in living standards in major cities, particularly in Addis Ababa. Notably, government-built condominium housing complexes have sprung up throughout the city, benefiting close to 600,000 individuals. Sanitation is the most pressing need in the city, with with most of the population lacking access to waste treatment facilities, and this contributes to the spread of illness through unhealthy water. And they also don't wash their hands thoroughly, so that's another reason too. Um, Now, despite the urban living conditions, residents of Addis Ababa are more financially secure than those living in the peasant associations, owing to their increased educational and economic opportunities. Unlike rural children, 69% of urban children are enrolled in primary school, and 35% are eligible to attend secondary school. Addis Ababa has its own university as well as its own secondary schools. The literacy rate in Addis Ababa is 82% as of 2008. According to record, there are 109 different languages spoken in Ethiopia, while Log lists about 90 individual languages spoken in the country. Most people in the country speak Afro-Asiatic languages of the Cushitic or Semitic branches. Um, the former includes the Oromo language spoken by the Oromo people and Somali spoken by the Somalians. The latter includes Amharic spoken by the Amhara people and the Tigrinya spoken by the Tigrians. Now together, these four groups make up about three-quarters of Ethiopia's population. Other Afro-Asiatic languages with a significant number of speakers include the Cushitic, Sidamo, Afar, Hadia, and Agawa languages, as well as the Semitic Garage languages. Um, Arabic also belongs to the Afro-Asiatic family, is likewise spoken in some areas. Now, English is the most widely spoken foreign language, the medium of instruction in secondary schools and all territory education. Federal laws are also published in British English in the Federal Gazette, including the 1995 Constitution. When it comes to religion in Ethiopia, about 60% are Christians. Um, Muslims about 34%, practitioners of traditional faiths about 2%, and other religions are less than 1%. The ratio of the Christian to Muslim population has largely remained stable when compared to previous censuses. Now, Sunnis form the majority of Muslims, with non-denominational Muslims being the second largest group of Muslims, and the Shia are the minority. Sunnis are largely Shafis, are Salafis, and there are so many Safis here. Now, Ethiopia has close historical ties with all three of the world's major Abrahamic religions. In the fourth century, the Ethiopian Empire was one of the first in the world to officially adopt Christianity as the state religion. As a result of the resolutions of the Council of Chalcedon in 451, the Miaphysites, which included the vast majority of Christians in Egypt and Ethiopia, were accused of monotheism and designated as heretics under the common rule of Coptic Christianity. Um, and then you got the Oriental Orthodoxy, and the Oriental Orthodoxy is by far the largest Christian denomination, and Islam in Ethiopia dates back to the founding of the religion in 622, when a group of Muslims were counseled by Muhammad to escape persecution in Mecca. Um, Only a minority of Ethiopians are born in hospitals, while most are born in their home. Those who are expected to give birth at home have been elderly women, serve as midwives who assist with the delivery. The WHO estimates that a majority of maternal fatalities and disabilities could be prevented if deliveries were to take place in well-equipped health centers with adequately trained staff. Now, Ethiopia's main health issues are said to be communicable, contagious diseases worsened by poor sanitation and malnutrition. Over 58 million people, which is nearly half the population, do not have access to clean water. So when it comes to education in Ethiopia, the current system follows a school expansion schemes which are very similar to the system in the rural areas during the 1980s. With an addition of deeper regionalization, providing rural education in students' own languages, and it's starting at the elementary level, and with more budgetary financing allocated to the education sector. Public education is free at primary levels and usually offers between ages of 7 and 12. The sequence of general education in Ethiopia is 6 years of primary school, and then 4 years of lower secondary school, followed by 2 years of higher secondary. And here's the entrance to the Addis Ababa University in Addis Ababa. At the top right there, that's the entrance to Addis Ababa. And then down at the bottom, you have the Ethiopian Museum of Art and Science showcases the country's newest innovations. Now, Ethiopian education is governed by the Ministry of Education and uses a 4+4+2+2 system. Elementary education consists of 8 years divided into two cycles of the four, and then 4 years of secondary education divided into two stages of 2 years. Um, as of 2022, there were 83 universities, 42 public universities, and more than 33 higher education institutions in all of Ethiopia. Um, Now, the culture of Ethiopia is a diverse one, and it was formed by the interaction of Semitic, Cushitic, and less populous Nilo-Saharan speaking people since the first millennium. The dominant Semitic speaking groups, such as the Tigrians, Amharas, and Garaj, are distinguished by their feudal traditions, hierarchical structure, and agrarian life. This is a rooted party this was rooted partly in South Arabia culture as a result of return migration, while the southern Cushitic, Oromo, and Somalian people are strongly adherents to egalitarianism and pastoral life. Ethiopia recognizes six patriotic six patriotic and public holidays and nine major religious holidays. The year the Gregorian calendar starts with Ethiopian Christmas, and Ethiopians celebrate Christmas on January 7th. Timkat Epiphany celebrated on January 19th and 20th, and it marks the baptism of Jesus Christ by John the Baptist. Timcot is recognized by the United Nations as part of its intangible cultural heritage list, which designate important cultural and religious holidays. Three holidays are movable: Ramadan, Good Friday, and Easter, two of which are always in spring, and one of which, Ramadan, may occur at any time of the year. Other holidays include Mawlid, which begins on the 12th or 17th day of the third month of the Islamic calendar, depending on the denomination of the celebrants. Um, the majority of Ethiopian Muslims are Sunni, thus it is celebrated on the 12th day. Other Islamic holidays include Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Now, Meskel is a Christian holiday celebrating the discovery of the true cross. Um, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha are transnational holidays celebrated across the Islamic world. While Meskel is celebrated in other countries, but it's most prominent in Ethiopia. Now, the first public holiday of the Gregorian calendar is Ottawa Victory Day on March 2nd, commemorating Emperor Menelik's second victory over the attempted but failed colonization efforts of Italy in 1896. Um, Others are International Workers' Day on the 1st of May, the Ethiopian Patriots Victory Day for celebrating the return of Emperor Selassie and thus the liberation of fascist Italian occupation on the 5th of May, and the downfall of the Derg on the 20th of May, a recent holiday promoted to public status after 1991. Now, the most prominent holiday is Enkatush, Ethiopian New Year celebration, which they celebrate on September 11th or 12th of the year. Defense Day Defense Day on the October 26th celebrates servicemen and is the last holiday in the Gregorian calendar. Various other festivals and holidays are celebrated across the country, including Iracha, celebrated by the Ramo community. So arts of Ethiopia were largely influenced by Christian iconography throughout much of their history, such as illuminated manuscripts, painting, crosses, icons, and other metal works such as crowns. Most historical arts were commissioned by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the state religion for a millennium earlier. Exumite period was most predominantly stone carvings as evidence in their stele, and there is no surviving Christian arts from this era. As Christianity was introduced, its iconography was partly influenced by the Byzantine art. Um, most remaining artworks beyond the early modern period were ruined as a result of the invasion of the Edel Sultanate in the Ethiopian highlands, but they were revived by Catholic missionaries, the Western intervention in Ethiopia, and began in the 20th century. Though artists maintained a traditional Ethiopian character in their work, some notable contemporary Ethiopian artists include Awa Awa Alpha Work Tekle, Lemna Guya, and so many others. Now, Aksumite architecture continued to flourish in the 4th century. Aksumite stele commonly used single blocks and rocks. The tomb of the false door, built for Aksumite empires, used a monolithic stone. The Lila civilization was largely influenced by the Aksumite culture, but the layer of stones or wood is quite different for some dwellings. Um, Ethiopian literature traces back to the Aksumite period in the 1st century. Mostly religious motives and royal inscriptions that employed both Gias and Greek, but unlike most sub-Saharan African countries, Ethiopia has an ancient, distinct language of Gias, which dominated politics and education. In spite of the current political instability in the country endangering the cultural heritage of these works, preservation has improved in recent years. Or they try to preserve stuff. Now, when it comes to music, the music of Ethiopia is extremely diverse, with each of the country's 80 ethnic groups being associated with different unique sounds. Ethiopian music uses a distinct modal system that is pentatonic, with characteristically long intervals between some notes. Um, Now, Ethiopia also has several different calendars that they use throughout the year. Um, Ethiopia has the Ethiopian Broadcasting Corporation, formerly known as ETV. It's a state-owned public service broadcaster, and it began in 1935, and it started televising itself on TV in 1962 with the assistance of British firm Thompson and Emperor Selassie. Um, Ethiopia also has its own newspapers. The most widely circulated newspapers in Ethiopia are the Addis Fortune, the Capital Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Reporter, Addis Zaman, which is an Amharic, and the Ethiopian Herald. Um, the first movie produced in Ethiopia was in 1898, and those were silent films. Never been big on those. Um, the best known Ethiopian cuisine consists of various types of thick meat stews, known and it's also known as wat in Ethiopian culture, and vegetable side dishes served on top of injera, a large sourdough flatbread made of tap flour. It's not eaten with utensils, but the injera is used to scoop up the entrees and side dishes almost universally in Europe or Ethiopia. It's commonly it's common to eat from the same dish in the middle of the table with a group of people. It is also a common custom to feed others with one's own hands, a tradition referred to as gersha. Um, Cheksaba, Marka, Chuko, Machira, and Dahanga are the most popular dishes from the Oromo people. Kitbo, which originated among the Garage people. The Garage people is one of the country's most popular delicacies. Um, in addition, Doro Wat and Tesabari Duro are other popular dishes originating from western Ethiopia. Tilo is a type of dumpling prepared from roasted barley flour and originating from the Tigray region. It's very popular in Amhara and spreading further south. The main sports in Ethiopia are track and field, particularly long distance, and football. Football meaning soccer. Ethiopian athletes have won many Olympic gold medals in track and field, most of them in long distance running. Um, the Ethiopia national football team was one of the four founding members of the Confederation of African Football, and they won the African Cup of Nations in 1962. But also, Ethiopia has a sub-Saharan Africa's longest basketball tradition, Ethiopia established a basketball team in 1949. So that is the end of our video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll be back next week with another video. So if you like the video on the live stream, make sure to give the live stream a like and subscribe to the channel or Rusty the King um for more videos like this. So next week we might talk about the Tylenol murders, which is an actual thing that did happen. Um, but I'm also going to research more videos to do for history, and I hope you guys like them as much as I do because I love my history, and it's always good to learn more about history. So that's the end of Ethiopia, and I'll be back next week with another video. I'm not going to post anything tomorrow, as I said at the beginning, because tomorrow is my birthday. So I'm probably more than likely not going to have a video up on either channel of mine. The other channel that I have is RBW King. More than likely, I will not have anything up on that. And I haven't had anything up on that in the last month or two. So I've been so busy with work. Anyway, so hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, I'll be back next week. But make sure to smash that like and subscribe button and share the video out if you so it can get more views.